Good evening, everyone. Welcome. First of all, I have to give a little advertisement. On behalf of the most wonderful people in Amherst, Ohio, the Amherst Historical Society group, we are honored to be able to present this to you. And there are refreshments that they provided, and there will be applications for membership, and it's only $25 a year for regular and $15 for senior to buy a membership to this wonderful organization. And if you have any Amherst historical documents or stories that you can put a presentation together with, they would be more than happy to work with you in that endeavor. So with that being said, Elizabeth, would you like to stand up? And this is one of the shining lights of the Amherst Historical. Elizabeth Fott, she helps everyone in the community make these things happen. And I just want to thank you. Thank you. Fred Powers, as most of you know, has been around for a very long time in education. And I was fortunate enough to call him Grandpa, and my mom was fortunate enough to call him Dad. And she never felt the wrath of him because all punishment was dealt out by Grandma. So she never felt the heavy hand like I did, because he would hit girls. And that was a fact. We were not allowed to. So, moving on. This sign used to be in front of Powers School, and it was made by Bill Oscom. He was a house painter and also an artist. And this sign stood there for years. And it just tells something about Grandpa, because he had huge hands, strong, caring, loving hands, and a mind that went along with them. But when I see that hand holding these children, that's Grandpa. And that's what he did for all those years. He was born in 1888, September 25th in Rootstown, Ohio. His family came here from Pennsylvania after fighting in the Revolutionary War. And the history goes further back to Nathaniel Greene and a whole host of other wonderful people in our history. And I was given a picture of his great-great-grandpa, Thomas Greene, who was a nephew of Nathaniel Greene, the fighting Quaker. So he has a deep history. He died in December 16th, 1983 in Amherst. He sold his last house 3 months before he died to my wife and I. The last house he sold was our house we bought on North Main Street. So he worked all the way up through his life, started working at a very young age. The family, Dr. Harry Powers, had a business in his office in Rootstown, and his mother, Susan Greene, hence Nathaniel Greene, Thomas Greene Powers, his sister Alice, his brother Ralph in the middle, and then Grandpa, and then Art Powers. That picture was taken in South Amherst. They moved from Rootstown to South Amherst when they were young children, and they all had jobs. Whether it was the chickens, the gardens, and everything, Grandpa took those skills through all the days of his life. He always had a garden, and he ate out of that garden, because that's what he was trained to do as a young boy. And then he only was allowed to go through 8th grade in South Amherst, and then came to Amherst with his brother to finish high school. Now the fun stuff starts. Athletics and athleticism. Grandpa was a natural athlete. He was a physical phenom. His body had 0 body fat. If he was in the garden with his shirt off, all you saw was raw muscle. And you never knew it. He was so gentle, so kind. So something he showed me when he was in his 70s. He had a couple of these nails. I'll just pass it around just so you can kind of see it. Kind of fun. And he would take a handkerchief in each hand and put that nail between it and bend and squeeze until he came up with this. He was probably 5'8", 5'9", weighed 180 pounds, but the strength of 10 men. Try your luck when that nail comes around. He was my age when he did that feat for me. Something else he did was kind of fun. Who's athletic in the high school over there? Who would be willing to come up here? Mrs. Marty, do you have anybody? Huh? Will, where's Will? Come here. Got somebody? Come on up. We need you for a second. I am so glad you were late. You will be punished. If you would face the crowd and hold this broom, arms wide out, a little wider, and bend down a little bit and jump over it.
Oh, no.
And then after you jump over it, jump back. Think you can do that?
No.
Well, Grandpa taught all us boys to do that when we were little.
Why don't you do it?
My doctor advised me not to listen to you. And that was one of the things that he did. Now, something else that he did. I want you to hold that broom up in the air, look towards me, and with all your strength, I want you to grip that broom and don't let it twist in your hands when it comes down. Now, don't let it twist in your hands. It's twisting in your hands. And he would challenge us to do that. It gets one better. Can you stand on one foot? Kind of? All right, now grab your toe.
This toe?
Yep, with your other hand. Now jump through there.
Oh, I can know.
And then jump back.
No.
Thank you for trying. I appreciate that. Round of applause, please. He was my age and still doing these things. It was amazing. Something else that he did, he was a boxer for Oberlin College and Amherst schools. And he was great. But if you looked at his nose, it didn't do so well. It got a little bit of punishment. But he loved boxing. He coached boxing when he came to Amherst to teach in 1916. He was coaching boxing. And in football, I'm sorry, 1913. Something else that he did, they would go down to the general store in South Amherst up on 113. And in the general store, they had a pickle barrel. And they had one that usually would put brooms or things in, and they would take them all out and take turns standing next to and vertical leaping into the barrel. Now, he was this tall. And these are things that he would challenge the boys to do at the high school. Physical challenges, things that they could do on their own time. And you never thought about him as an athlete, but he loved sports. Now here's his graduating class of 1906. Amherst Union School. That was the last year they had a class before it burned down. Let's see here. There's Grandpa. There's my Grandpa Miller. And there's his brother Art. They graduated together, class of 6. And that's his high school picture. Now, he worked his way through college, and he graduated in '06, but he didn't graduate college till 1913. And the reason was finances. He worked on the Great Lakes. Oh no, there we go. He worked as a steward on the Great Lakes during the summer, and the money he saved went back to Oberlin. Then he worked in the quarries, and the money he saved went back to Oberlin. Well, one year they needed a teacher. He had 2 years in and got his teaching certificate. Here he is at the Sandstone School in South Amherst, which was the American Legion, next to the home where he lived. And he's teaching elementary school there in 1908. So that's why he didn't graduate till 13, because he was earning his way through college. He started out in the quarries as a laborer, and they saw him and said, "We need you to run this crane to load curbing stones." Curbing stones were sandstone about this high and about 8 inches wide, and they would dig the trough and lower the stones in, and those were the curbs along the sides of the road. And he would load those on a railroad car with a steam-operated crane. Teacher and coach, this was his first year at Amherst High. This was now the Central School, which was rebuilt after the fire. And Grandpa, I think my battery's at its better days. Anyway, the Grandpa's over to the right, and he brought in the 7-man line to Amherst football. They had 5-man line before. He brought the modern 7-man line, which he learned when he played ball at Oberlin. He loved the game. But he got called away to work in Madison as a superintendent. And he was there for a couple of years. And then they called him back to Amherst and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And I'm glad they did. Here he is with some of the board members. And Miss Marion L. Steele, oh, I wish this thing was working. Maybe. Marion L. Steele is in the middle. Right here. And this is Art Engel. Over there's Henry Penton on the far side, names that you heard about, wonderful people of Amherst who were on the Board of Ed. And for many years, he stayed with Amherst Schools until he became the principal of Powers. The neat thing about Grandpa, he was always thinking ahead. And we're talking about modern technology of the time. They had a PA system throughout the school. It was brand new. Before they knock on the door and give you the information. He made sure that was put in there. Here's another, the library at Power School. You notice there's an AM radio in the school, a television set, a recording device, all these modern technology things that to us seem ancient, but at that time and place, they were avant-garde. Something else that he did, this was Elmer Reichert. Oh, you got it read? Yeah. Oh, thank you. Elmer Reichert worked for Johnny Penton selling motorcycles, and Elmer graduated from Amherst, but he was a member of the Flying Club. They would meet down at the airport on 58. They had to learn Morse code. They had to learn navigation. They had to learn radio communications of all types, emergency information, first aid, and learn how to fly in Amherst schools. Did you ever know that? I just think it's amazing. Amherst First school buses. Now, of course, these are not Amherst First because this is a power school. Here's the old power school. And here's the buses from the 1950s. Well, back in the 1920s, when times were tough, depression was ready to hit, things were not going well, around 1930, the population was spreading out in Amherst, the district was getting bigger, and they needed buses. Well, the state would reimburse if you purchased a bus. They didn't have money to purchase a bus. When Grandpa went to Oberlin College, one of his roommates got a job for International Harvester, manufacturing truck chassis. He tied up with him and said, hey, I'm going to buy 3 of these trucks from you and put a school bus body on it, but I need to show the titles. So his friend got him 3 documents saying that those buses were purchased by Amherst, sent that to the state, they got the funds and had the buses completed and paid for. Now that's creative thinking. Today they'd probably put you in jail. Back then it worked. And busing is something that I did for 35 years, so I understand the importance of moving the kids safely. He spearheaded a scrap drive during World War II. And the cool thing about this picture is that number 31 is my dad. He's one of the students that just got off of football practice and they're helping load scrap. And there's Grandpa, and there's Reverend Albright. And all the people in the community would tear apart their antiques and equipment that we give our eye teeth to have right now here at the historical room, but got scrapped for the war effort. He wrote letters daily to deployed servicemen and women, and even worked overnight at U.S. Automatic, Nordson Manufacturing, weaponry components for the war. Due to the financial hardships during World War II, Grandpa was known to forfeit his salary to ensure his faculty got paid. Here's proof. He worked the 11 to 7 shift, and somehow, working a lathe, very skilled man, he could do anything he put his hands to, and you look at the size of those hands. And that's how he survived, so Mom could have clean clothes to wear to school and meals to eat, and the teachers could get paid. And he wrote letters to all the servicemen somewhere in between and going to the activities. Now, one thing more, I mentioned Miss Steele earlier on. When Miss Steele was principal, she was not allowed to attend any Ohio state meeting for principals or superintendents because she was a woman. Grandpa had to go to every meeting, take notes on his own time, and give them to her. He thought that much of her, that she was worth all that time that he devoted for that. When did you ever see your dad? He wasn't around much, was he? This is when they dedicated Power School. This is my Uncle Harry, Fred's oldest son from his first wife. His first wife died when they were in Massillon. And then he got moved back to Amherst. And here's my grandma, Burl Kuss Powers. There's Grandpa, and there's Mary Bell, sitting right there, standing right there. And that's Julie, and that's my dad, Parker. This was in 1953, and I was born at the time of that, right before that dedication, so I wasn't in the picture. The 1953 yearbook has a picture of the cutest baby that you ever want to lay your eyes on. And there he is. That's little Normie. There's Mom, there's Liz, there's Julie, and there's Grandpa with a 16 millimeter camera that he was given, I believe, by the Teachers Association as a gift. And he filmed so many things that are still archived to this day, thank you to Russ. He found a whole bunch of the original 16 millimeters and put them into, what was it called?
I had your mom narrate.
Okay.
2 hours of his footage.
Okay.
It's fascinating. She didn't sleep.
So it's all saved, all the pictures that he took from the 50s on. And I've got some of my class coming out of Power School. It's just a wonderful thing that technology, he just was always pushing.
And that camera's still on the school and it works.
Mm-hmm. And here's the family. Here's my little brother Joel, sister Liz, Mom, sister Julie, and myself. When we lived in this house, this was on Cooper Foster at the north end of the farm. Grandpa Miller's farm went from Milan Avenue to Cooper Foster. That was our playground when we were kids. And here's Grandpa hard at it, being a grandpa. It's my sister's. That's our house on Cooper Foster. And he just came out, and everywhere he went, he had a shirt and tie and a coat on. That's why most of you people see me in bib overalls or jeans or whatever. Well, tonight I dressed for Grandpa. But look at the size of his hands and his forearms. And he was a gentleman. So you think about this. His IQ was off the charts, his letter writing, the notes that he sent out to the community. You never thought about his physical prowess, but there was a basketball game in 1936. It was Amherst versus South Amherst. And there was a big rivalry. And the South Amherst boy was up at the line, and he was dribbling the ball. He was ready for a foul shot. And he never took the shot. And the crowd's screaming. People are getting angry. Next thing you know, people are coming out of the stands. Grandpa runs over to the power switch, turns off the light, turns it back on, stands in the middle of the floor and challenges everybody. So the first 8 that he would have knocked down didn't know who they were, so they all went back and sat down and the game continued. But it's just things like that. You think about this gentle, kind man who would take charge of this situation. And then you think, well, they tore down Power School, and they usually tear down the name. They built a new Power School, and they continued the name. Just because of what he did, who he was, and all the people that he impacted in one way or another, hopefully in good ways. Now, he was very engaged and involved. Like I keep telling Mom, when did you ever see Grandpa? I guess you had to go to the activities. That's at one of the proms, he and Grandma. This is the coolest picture. This was the year my Grandpa Miller died in October of 1961. But Power School, he made plans for the whole school. All Power School grades, K through 4. This is the New York Central tracks. Right here is where KTM would be. This is where the Eagles would be. And that field was nothing but pumpkins. Grandpa made a deal with his best friend and classmate, Norm Miller, my grandpa, to have the kids come out and have a field day to pick a pumpkin and get taken back to the school by bus. And it just, who thinks of that? Here's where he always would lead the Memorial Day parade, hand out flags to all the kids downtown Amherst. This is one of the Latin teas. He would play the part. And this is Mrs. Penton whistling on Arbor Day. And every year we would plant a tree and she would whistle and he would quote poetry. He loved poetry. One of his favorite authors was Rudyard Kipling. And he had all his collection of books and quoted him many, many times through his life. He was a 65-year Freemason plus. He was a past master of Stonington Lodge in 1931. So the Amherst schools agreed to put a cornerstone in, a Masonic cornerstone, in honor of Fred Powers Elementary School 2019. The mayor is a brother. This is some of my other brothers from the lodge. There's me and my other brothers. This was a gentleman who was a Mason who designed and made sure the stone was placed. He was with the construction company. But what a beautiful thing. And when you think about Freemasonry in Amherst, which I know the Cottons are familiar with, they're our next door neighbors to the lodge, Grandpa had two schools named in his honor. Marion L. Steele was in Eastern Stars. The high school is named after her. Freemasonry in Amherst had a huge effect on the building of this community. Grandpa's favorite saying about Masonry is, as I sit here and do this work, I know George Washington did the exact same. And as his birthday wish at 90 years old, he asked that he could run the Master Mason degree and raise a Master Mason. He did it all from memory at age 90, which is about a 2-hour evolution, start to finish. And I think about my complaining of studying my little parts for what I have to do and think about what he did. I take a step back and start over. Grandpa was also in Rotary International, and he was a past president, and they used to hold their meetings in the basement of the Congregational Church. And who could tell me what else the basement of the Congregational Church was used for about 30 years before that picture?
School.
No? Bigger than the school. Bigger than the school. Yes, it was used for a school. The gymnasium. It was the gymnasium for the Amherst schools. It was an open cavity in the ground that the Congregational Church and Grandpa worked together to build until they had the funds to put the gymnasium in, which is now the cafeteria for 1907 Central School. Always thinking. Oops, oops, oops. Oops. Let's see if I can help this. All right, Russ, what do I do wrong? Back to it. This is French.
Yeah, you got here, Miss Marie.
You'll be back.
You just heard part of one of the French classes that Miss Marie conducts down here at Powers Elementary School. She's done that for the last 2 years. Children are in grades 4 and 5, and they use conversational French. Of course, built up without any textbooks. We've been very much pleased with the way that works out. one day last year, the class put on a little program up the stage, and it was really quite a little French play. After one of the girls asked me down in the audience, Mr. Powers, why do the French people talk like that? It's quite a question.
So Grandpa retired shortly after that. That was about 1959 or 60 where that picture was. And at the end of my 3rd grade year, he retired and went into real estate. He first worked for Bill Edwards and then with Ray Half, who was right there. And there's Grandpa at age 95. Amazing. That was his last year, and here he is with Jim Abraham in his mid-90s. And Jim Abraham, as you all know, purchased a plethora of lots in Amherst, properties all over, which are now developed, that were, we would call, unfarmable, hard pan land. You could grow dandelions in that property. Oh, who'd want that? As the mindset of that time. Well, Jim Abraham and Grandpa became great friends, and all of Jim Abraham's transactions of land went through Grandpa. He's the only man he trusted. And as you know, Jim Abraham owned thousands of properties that are now developed along 58, where Giant Eagle is, along Cooper Foster where the police station is. All those properties, he purchased that up because it just was not good farmland, which was, we were farmers back then. We weren't forward-thinking businessmen. Grandpa was thinking, and so was Jim. At Grandpa's memorial service at Powers School, they quoted Rudyard Kipling, and it's not quite exactly the way it is, but something to the effect, it's on the poem If, which Rudyard wrote about and entered apprentice in masonry, which is what it was about. But it says, he could walk with kings and not lose touch with the common man. Oops, sorry. What'd I do, Russ? You gotta help me. You gotta bail me. I hit an emotion on that one. But this was Grandpa's favorite saying, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And this was what he would do every day. In this chair, he would read. And when he finished reading this, he would read scripture every day of his life. And that's why he was who he was. And could I get the lights up? And somebody want to hit the light switch? Thank you. Are there any questions pertaining to what I just talked about? I think I covered it all.
Aren't you gonna ride the bike?
Oh,
there?
one thing Grandpa did, and I'm sorry, like I say, I just got caught up in a moment. I wanted to show you this before we left. When Grandpa was a little older than I am now, he took a bicycle such as this, and he mounted it, I can't even do it. He mounted it backwards. I don't want to trip and fall in front of everybody. And he would get on the pedals, and he rode around the block. In his mid-70s. I had a hell of a time driving it forward when I took it out of the basement today. The guy was just amazing in mind, body, and spirit. And he gave so much to this community. That is why they honor him today. I made it. was tough. Any other questions? Yes?
You said that he and his brother went to school until 8th grade, Emerson. What about Adam? What about the sister?
Mom, you could tell more about Grandpa's sister. What year did she graduate? Alice.
She was a conservatory graduate over in
Music, right? Piano?
Yes.
Okay.
It was piano, organ, the whole bit. And then she went to teach in college, primarily high school.
Okay. But do you know what year she graduated high school? I couldn't find. What year did she graduate high school?
I think she went to high school part-time in
Oh, she went to Oberlin because South Amherst only went up to 8th grade, so she didn't graduate. That's why I couldn't find her Amherst information. It wasn't there. Yes?
Norm, I'm one of the Power School kids. I was there from 61 to 64. And I remember a friend of Powers. And I think I remember him in the lawn. And I remember he had a hearing aid.
Yes.
That was the first hearing aid I ever saw. And I have a very strong memory of him. I must have seen him many times. I don't know who he was exactly. And he always seemed like a really nice person.
Yes,
That was-
and he knew your name. He knew your name, your mom's name, your dad's name, your aunts and uncles' names. Everybody in town, he knew their names. And if he didn't know their names, he would find out who they were. In reference to his hearing aid, he had some kind of an ailment when he was younger and got a high fever, and it didn't affect him until he was probably in his 50s when his hearing started to go from that. And Sonotone put out 1948, they put out a paper magazine of him and his Sonotone. So he would wear the amplifier here and the wire in the ear. So if this was a telephone, he'd hold it upside down. Like you would have the ear here, this was the ear. He would talk in the phone like, look at him. Oh, he gets the job done. But yeah, but he did well with it. And one thing about Grandpa, his wife had a voice that could penetrate diamonds, cut glass right in half. And if he was doing something that she didn't care for, Fred! And us kids would say, Grandpa, how do you deal with that? He'd shut off his hearing aid. Any other questions? Yes, Pat.
At this memorial at the Cleveland, or the Crown Hill Cemetery, there's a beautiful quartz stone. Is there a story behind that?
Something that he admired from, was it New England? It was prominent from New England. They had properties up there at one time, and there were quartz stones like that in the area. And they had a cabin that they bought an insurance policy on. Come to find out it was a bogus policy, and the cabin burned, and he sold the property. But he remembered, it was by the old man in the mountain. There was the guy that looked like an old man in the mountain. It was up in that area. Huh? New Hampshire. Green Mountain. Green Mountain. So, yeah, that's why that happened. Now, the community, on his 90th birthday, in 1978, unfortunately, I was on an aircraft carrier in the South Pacific off the coast of Vietnam wondering what the heck are we doing over here? The war's over, but we were still playing games. And Ed Mullinex had a wonderful showroom, the biggest in the world. He emptied out all the cars and filled that showroom with supporters for Grandpa's 90th birthday. And there was a nice article in the News Times, and I know the reps donated a beautiful plaque that will be on display here at one time. Maybe it is now. But we donated it here to the Historical Society. Any other questions?
When did he live on Cleveland?
He moved from Cornell there in the early 1950s because Grandma didn't like the fact that we're going to develop behind the house on Cornell. They're going to put apartments up or something, and she didn't stand for that. So that was the old Legion, the American Legion, post 118. When he bought it and he had to convert it back into a livable home, which was quite a project, but he did it, and it at one time was a beautiful house. And he lived there the rest of his life. And like I say, that was, probably, what, 51 or 2? They moved to Cleveland Avenue?
About the same time the school was built.
Yeah, so it was early 50s. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I remember when Powers Elementary opened up, and we all walked down there carrying our books.
And desks and...
And I think that the walk, but I'm not certain.
I'm sure he was there directing traffic and making sure everybody got across the street safe. Very conscientious. So yes, I'm a very proud grandson, and if I could make 1/10 of an impact to my fellow man that he did, my life would have been a success. And I thank you very much. I'd like to thank Matt Nahorn, who took some pieces of the old floor from the Power School floor, made a frame, and presented this to me. Powers Elementary, gym floor, 1953 to 2019, when Mr. Marty spearheaded getting it moved over to the high school in a history room. Thank you, Matt.